At the beginning of the parsha, the Torah tells us that Avram was sitting at the entrance of the tent to see if there were any wayfarers coming down the road. And when he saw three people, Shlosha Noshim, the Torah tells us, Vayoratz the Krosami Pesach oil. He ran towards them from the entrance of his tent. Vishtachu Arza. So seemingly, if the Torah would have said he saw them, Vayoratz the Krosam, Vishtachu Arza, he ran towards them. The Torah already tells us he's sitting at the entrance of his tent, looking to see if there are any wayfarers. He sees three men. It should say Vayoratz the Krosam. So if he's Pesach oil, where else is he running from? He's running from the Pesach oil. So why does there have to mention that he's running from the Pesach oil? You understand the question? Torah says he's sitting, Hu Yoshi Pesach oil Kechom Hayom. He's sitting at the Pesach oil Kechom Hayom. Now he lifts up his eyes, he sees three people. Vayoretz the Krosam, Vishtachu Arza. It should have said he ran towards them, he prostrated himself. But Torah again mentions he ran the Krosmi Pesach oil from the entrance of the tent. What's the value of mentioning that point again? If it's obvious he was sitting at the entrance of his tent, he ran from the entrance of his tent. So the Siforno makes a point over here. So if you have a Siforno, he explains the Pesach oil. The question is, where did he start running from? Did he start running from the location that he was at, was Pesach oil? Or he went slowly, and when he got close, he ran towards them. So he says, because when one shows alacrity, zeal, when you do anything, that shows that special value to the one who you're hurrying towards him. Meaning you want to get there as soon as possible to accommodate that person. So therefore the Torah is telling us to show them the degree to what he values them. It's not he walked slowly and as he got closer, he hurried. He ran towards them. From the very beginning, from the Pesach, he ran from there. You know, person starts off slowly, then as it gets closer, he rushes. No, he hurried, he rushed from the Pesach to show the one he was rushing towards to what degree he valued him. That's why the Torah repeats, he ran from the Pesach oil. So I was thinking, we see a number of times when Eliezer is sent to find a wife for Yitzchok, and he's mispalel, he prays. The maiden goes out, draws water, and I will ask her, so on and so forth. So the Torah tells us, Rivka, when she heard that Eliezer needed water, she offered the water, she rushed to the trough, and so on and so forth. All this rushing also shows the zrizus, the degree to what she valued, to do chesed, to accommodate Eliezer. She rushed continuously, because rushing shows one's chashivus, one's degree, the way one values something. If something has great importance, you do it with alacrity, with zeal. You don't tarry. Same idea, but there's something else it says over there. Eliezer asked Rivka a number of questions, and the Torah tells us when she answered him, she was answering him al rishon al hashen and achron achro. When he asked the two questions, and she responded to answer first the first question and the second question. And that's the indication of what? Of chokhmah, of wisdom. If you answer the first question first, then the second question, the question is why. So the simple understanding is, if I ask two questions, and I ask one before the other, why did I ask the first before the second? Evidently, the first question was more urgent than the second. Otherwise, why don't you ask the second question before the first? It's not where the second question is contingent on the first. But she answered the first, and so evidently, of course, I understand you want to be made aware of the first thing you're asking for, the second. So to accommodate, to value you, that I want to accommodate, to elucidate the first point, I elucidate the first point with the second point. It's chashivas adam. It shows to what degree I'm sensitive to accommodate your question. So therefore, I respond to the first before I respond to the second. Pasuk Yud, Parshas Vayera. Vayom Shovo Shuvei Lecho. Keis Chayo. I will return to you. Keis Chayo. At this time, when you should be alive, B'nei ben l'sarishtecho. And behold, Sarah, your wife, will have a son. V'Sarah shamas pesach oil. And Sarah is listening from the entrance of the tent, V'Achrov. And V'Achrov, so Rashi says, the Pesach was behind the Malach, because she was listening from the entrance. She was behind, she was in the oil. So when the Malach was speaking to Avram, informing him this, that Sarah's going to have some, she was there listening to what the Malach said. Because what's they have to tell me that? Because she overheard the conversation. Because we said earlier, it's not, Sarah did not miss a beat. It's not Sarah says, this is your thing to do. Sarah was involved with Hachnosas Orchim as much as Avram was. Except because of her modesty, she was in the tent. But even though she was in the tent, she was fully aware of what was going on. And because of that, she overheard the conversation. It's not something Avram shared with her. Because it's interesting. If it's something Avram shared with her, if she was slightly skeptical, maybe she would say, maybe Avram didn't hear accurately. Maybe it's not exactly as you say it. But here she heard it firsthand. She heard what the Malach said firsthand, that she's going to have a son. But the point I want to make, that Sarah, everything that was going on within her proximity, although she was not seeing, she was fully aware what was going on. And therefore she heard what the Malach had said to Avram Avinu. But Rashi says, what's Ke'es Chayor? Ke'es Azos L'Shon Haba. At this moment in the following year, Pesach Chayor. And it was Pesach, when the Malachim came to Avram, it was Pesach. Ule Pesach Haba Nolad Yitzchok. And a year later, Yitzchak was born. Midlo Karinan Ke'es and Leko'es. The vowels, it's not like about. Ko'es means, the komatz means exactly at this time. Ko'es hazo shtei chayo lochem, shtei kulchem shlemim v'kayomim. At this time, you will all be fully alive. At this time, not Ke'es means about this time. Okay? Therefore, he was born on Pesach, not the proximity of Pesach. The Sephorah makes a point over here. Why is the Torah telling us that the entrance, the Pesach was behind the Malach? Because he says by Elisha, when he told Isha Shunamis that she's going to have a child, he spoke to her directly, if you remember. She was the one who hosted Elisha, and she made sure that he had an accommodation, and he asked her, what do you want? And she didn't have a child. So he told her, you will have a child a year from now, similar to this. But he spoke directly to her. So why did the Malach speak directly to Sarah Imenu? The answer is because she wasn't there. He says, The reason we wanted to speak to her because the pesel was behind him, and she wasn't present. The Torah tells us at this moment, Avram and Sarah were old. They were advanced in age. Now, evidently, we already know from the previous parsha at the end that Avram is 99 years old and Sarah is 89. So evidently, seemingly that's old. So what does Torah tell them? They're old, advanced in age. Seems to be, it's obvious. Somebody comes to you and says, I'm 99 years old. It seems to be pretty old. She's 89. That's old. And the Torah tells us, she's way beyond menopause. It's obvious. What's the Torah telling us? Because maybe you would say, how many years did Avram live? He lived to 175. So if you live to 175, evidently, when you're 99, it's not so old. Or if you can live until 127, 89 is not so old. This Torah doesn't know. Even though they live those long years, at this moment, 99 is old. 89 is born by Yomim. That's advanced. In those years, as we said, after the Mabul, people didn't live the long years they'd lived before. Even though we find that Terach lived till the age of 205. For Avram, they lived extremely longer years. But in their time, 99 was old, 89 was old for a woman. That's why the Torah is going out of its way, because you'd say, maybe in retrospect, if we see they lived so long, at 99, it wasn't such a miracle. At 89, it's not such a miracle. No, the Torah is telling us they were old. At this time, they were old. And B'derech HaTeva, naturally, you're not able to father a child, and she's not able to conceive a child. That's the point the Torah is making over here. There's a Canaan born by, then not just a Canaan, they're born by Yomim. They're considered already at advanced age. And makes it a point, and therefore Sori Menu is no longer able to conceive. But nevertheless, the Malach said, she will have a child a year from now, you will father that child, and Sarah will be the mother of that child. That means a miracle is going to happen. But Titzrak Sarah B'kir B'leimor, Sori Menu, when she heard this, the Titzrak, she like chuckled, meaning to indicate she was skeptical. As they say, what else is new? Do you think it's really going to happen? You take it with a degree of skepticism. But she didn't verbalize it to Avram. This is something in her own mind. She actually was thinking this. And what did she think? Was saying to herself, after I've withered, am I going to have that supple body, mean like a young woman, that I'm able to have a child? Vadoni is okay. And my master is old. It's a double miracle. Firstly, I'm an old woman. And Rashi says two interpretations. Edno either means the suppleness, or Edna means the time. Meaning back to the menstrual cycle. Am I going to have my menstrual cycle restored? And even if I will, it's like a double miracle. A man my husband's age is not able to father a child. So that just intensified the skepticism. Let's see, Rashi. Bekirbo, mistakelis b'meme'o, she was looking at her body and said, Efsha karavayim halolo tun in vlad. Is it possible that this womb, my innards, are able to carry a child? Hashadai maleu shetzomko, by breasts that dried up. Moshchen cholov, I'm going to lactate. Tanchuma. Edna, what's Edna? Tzitzur Boser, the suppleness of the flesh. Loshenishna Meishir Asar Madinus Aboser, expression. Davarache Loshen Idon. Zman Vesis Nidus, meaning the cycle. I might have my cycle restored. And in addition, Adoni's okay. So she said 2 points. She is not at a point that she's able to conceive. In addition, and even somehow miraculously she could, but here, because my husband is so old, it's too far-fetched. So she was saying 2 things. Even somehow you hear of such things, but if 2 things are in place, impossible. It's not a possibility. That was the basis for her skepticism. Because I'm going to bring out a point. Because Hashem only shares with Avraham Avinu. She said, Anizokanti, I'm old. Hashem didn't share with her saying, Adoni's okay. Okay, we mentioned yesterday, to Shalom Bayis. You're permitted to alter the truth for the sake of Shalom Bayis. The point I made was, you couldn't have had a more secure relationship than Avram and Sarah. They were through thick and thin. And we learn from here that you're permitted to be Mashana, to alter the truth for the sake of Shalom Bayis. Because you never know, it could put a damper on the relationship. Do you think Avram's relationship with Sarah would somehow be slightly minimized because of this? But yet we learn from here. Why? Because the Torah is telling us you can't pass judgment on somebody else's Shalom Bayis. You never know. You have to be extra sensitive. That's what Hashem is teaching us. So it's thinking, as secure as this relationship is, Avram Avinu, we see when it was by Yitzchak, it means chodi, as the Targum said in last week's parsha. He rejoiced. He was joyous. By her, it was skepticism. If you have your wife and you hear, and it has to do with one's level of hashkafa, one's Torah perspective, and your wife reacts or responds to something in a way which is not up to par, and you hear you're at that level where you believe she should be, it touches you badly. It's not because he's being put down. It's not being he's put down. Again, as the Ramban explains, here there's like a double miracle. A woman her age, it's unheard of. And even it is heard of, 1 in 10 million, maybe, but if the husband's old, in addition, that's an impossibility. But if you have emunah and bitochen, there's nothing impossible. Okay, so Hashem only shared with Avram. She said, "Adonis, I am old. I am." Not the point, but if she would have said the likelihood, because of this double issue, it's unheard of. But you understand. But if you're where Avram is, there's no such thing as unheard of. So if there's nothing such thing as what are you skeptical even for a moment? It would touch Avram Avinu in a bad way. You understand? If it's just the way the Ramban explains, if it's just Anizo Kanti, so you know something, it's a statistic, but there's always possible outside of that statistic. So it's not emunah b'tochen so much. You know, it's a reality you could. So Hashem says lo mitzoch kesora, but it's a little bit. It's not something which is an impossibility, but he says she should have accepted it. But if it would be considered an impossibility, and the only way it could happen, you need that special level of emunah and b'tochen, it's considered a greater failing on Sarah's part. So if Avram sees his wife in the area of emunah and bitochen somehow is not where she should be, it may touch Avram in a bad way. That's the Shalom Bayis. It's not that Doni Zoki means that it'll affect the Shalom Bayis because like a person says, you lost your potency. It's like a put down on a man. You're not potent. No, it has nothing to do with that. Here, Adoni Zokin has to do with because the likelihood is an impossibility. To Avram Avinu, There's no such thing as a possibility. When he was told that he's going to have a child, what does it say? Vayamein, he believed in last week's, and says Vayashra lo l'tzedakah. It was considered righteousness that he was going to have a child. And Tur points that out. So that was righteousness. So that's another question. If it's considered righteousness, so why would it affect Shalom Bayis? For Avram, it's considered exceptional. So why does it claim against Sarah? We said Sarah was a greater prophetess than Avram Avinu. Maybe for Sarah's level, to be a Navi, as the Rambam says in Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah, you have to be at that very special level. So if she outpaced him in the Nevuah, that she's a greater receptacle to receive that communication, what he would have expected of her would be beyond himself. So how did you somehow slip on this one? That's the Shalom Bayis we're talking about. Why did Sarah laugh, saying, and he's saying what she said? Why was she skeptical? Is it possible I will give birth and I'm old? I've already become aged. Rashi, it is possible that I can give birth, that I can conceive. Shina Kosov Shalom. Hashem altered the truth for the sake of peace. Sharehi Omra Adoni Zoke. Because what did she actually say? She said Adoni Zoke. She said he was old. She didn't say Adi Zokanti. Church just tells us she was beyond menopause. And we said earlier, she looked at herself. He says, now that I've reached menopause, it says, Bekirbo, she looked at herself. But making the point, the main emphasis was Adoni's okay. My master is okay. Is it possible?
Rabbi,
I just want to point out one thing. It's interesting. Soren and Avram Avinu had a relationship one of a kind. And she refers to her husband, and she's talking to herself. Adoni's okay. I mean, is Avram Adoni? Not Adoni. We find Esav, Lahavdil, when Yaakov sends the messengers, I'm doing all this for the sake of my Avdcha Yaakov, your servant Yaakov, and Esav's the master. There he has to play the game. Because if Esav feels to any degree that Yaakov is not secondary to him, it may cost him his life. Therefore, Esav is the Adon and he's Avdcha Yaakov. But over here, evidently, if Hashem says, how did she say Adoni's okay? She could have said Ishti's okay. My husband's old. What's Adoni? What does that say? That you see that the degree that Sori Menu esteemed and valued her husband truly as a master. Although she was the wife, she understood that she was a secondary figure. As much as she was integral, Sori Megayeris Anoshim. She converted the women, he converted the men. But who was the one who actually was the driving force over here? Who was the one? It was Avram Avinu. And she fully internalized this reality that who's Adoni? He's an Adon. Meaning she's totally negated to her husband. As a subject is negated, does the will of the master, she's there to serve her husband. We find that the woman was created to be the Eza Kenegdo. She's there. What's her purpose? What's her value? To be of assistance to her husband. That's what it is. Although she's a full partner, because she's integral to his success, but she is a secondary figure regarding the objective. Because who bears the responsibility? The husband bears the responsibility. So she fully internalized the concept that Avram is Adoni. He's the Odon. She's the Eza Kenegdo. Even when she's speaking to herself, Adoni's okay. She didn't say Avram's okay, Ishti's okay, Adoni's okay. Just to bring out that point.
Rabbi.
There's a story, if you read the book on Moshe Feinstein, when the communists took over, Moshe Feinstein was a Rav in the community in Russia. And the Russians, especially that he was a rabbi, or that he was doing things at certain points, he had to be very careful. But he was a person known, he sat, studied, he was leader of a community, although he was a young man. And they gave a task that they have to go out and lay tracks for a railroad. And the ones who were given this responsibility were the men. And they had to dig pits, whatever it is, out in the fields. Could you imagine Moshe Feinstein, if even as a young man, it's not to believe what he knew and what he was and how he was involved and dedicated. There's a story there. I think there was a boy. He was Ramosha. He was learning Bava Metzia, Bava Kama, and he was maybe, 12, 13 years old. And Ramosha was speaking to him, asked him, how much he learned, whatever was said. And Ramosha said to himself, while he was speaking to the boy, at the age of 8, he already knew Bava Kama by heart. At the age of 8 years old. Rebbe Feinstein, you know what she did? She went out to the field. She dug the pits. She laid the tracks, not to interrupt Rav Moshe's Torah study. You understand? She's a woman. We're talking about labor, real labor, because they would check what was the quota, what they expected of him was in place. So rather than interrupting that, Rav Moshe should take away from his learning and go dig the pits or lay the tracks, she went and did that. To what degree does she have to esteem her husband to be able to do that? No question. This is, you revere Torah to such a level, and your husband representing that, this borders on Adoni. I'm here to serve him, that his Torah should not be diminished as much as an iota, and his potential should not be diminished as much as an iota. You'd say, there's a limit up to a point. You don't expect your husband to wash the dishes because he has a Seder, right? But to go dig pits, that's man's work, not a woman's work. Now, you see the degree of Eza Kenegdo, to what degree she was his partner to make sure that he should not be distracted as much as an iota. That's Adoni's okay. He reacted or responded in a joyous way. It was skepticism. What's the difference between Sori Menu and Avram? Well, she said Iboni Mimeno. Maybe that's the point where you want to ask the question towards the end. She said, I will build through her. In fact, the child is the child of a slave woman. She's an Egyptian. As much as a person adopts a child, it's not their child. They may, as a maternal feeling, all that may evolve as a result of that, but it's not your child. So we explained that Sari Menu believed that the reason why she did not conceive yet, and why was she not worthy to be the matriarch, the mother of the future patriarch, she wasn't worthy. So why was she worthy? Evidently, she had some kind of spiritual shortcoming within herself. That's why she wasn't worthy. So why don't we recognize our shortcomings, spiritually speaking? Because we feel we're doing okay or even more than okay. So you have to have a level of humility, extreme level of humility, to recognize where you're not at, We believe we're at certain points, but we're not necessarily there. So she attributed the reason why she wasn't able to conceive, to be worthy of a miracle, let's say a miracle, is because she wasn't worthy. So what does she do? She gives a maidservant to her husband, and there's nothing more sensitive to a woman than the exclusivity she has with her husband. And here she's willing to share that with a maidservant, with her maidservant. As a result of that, she felt that would be a negation in her to bring about a greater level of clarity. By negating herself, maybe she'll be able to recognize what has to be corrected. And that's what she did. And maybe she did make corrections. It still didn't work. She went to the nth degree to negate herself, and she still didn't merit to have the child. So what was the conclusion in her mind? God doesn't want her to have the child. She's not worthy of having the child to be the mother matriarch. That was the conclusion in her mind. Emotionally, mentally, it's not happening. Avram never came to the point it's not happening. It's possible, but in her mind, because she took every initiative, even to take the maidservant, and it still didn't happen, Hashem says it's not happening. So because in her mind she concluded it's not happening, now Hashem, now all of a sudden it's happening. Sarah is going to have the child. So because in her mind she already concluded and she wrote it off, it's not happening, for her to accept that, you needed a greater level of emunah to accept it. And evidently it was expected of her, especially since she was a greater prophetess than Avraham Avinu. At her level, there was a claim against her. Lamatzov Kosora. Anizakanti. Therefore what? When it comes to Hashem, there's no such thing, Anizakanti. Hashem could do anything. Regardless, that was the claim. So initially, she also believed she would merit a miracle because the failing lied within her. But after it was proven to her, no, it has nothing to do with her worthiness. She's not meant to be the matriarch. Period. The answer is no. You're meant to be the matriarch. And your conclusion is not accurate. And therefore, you should have had the emunah when you heard you will have, and that you're not, that was considered a failing on her part.
Rabbi.
That's the way I explained it.